Hi guys, it's Tracy in Australia, and I would just like to thank everyone for all the positive comments I received about my first tutorial. That was so encouraging. So today I would like to share with you part 2, which is about how I make my fabric covers for these grunge journals. And I'll just show you this one. So I use fabric for the inside and the outside, and I like to put a large doily or a large piece of lace or something over the top, and then do some collaging on the front around a central image. So I'll show you the one that I've selected for the fairy journal that I was working on, and I've decided to go with this piece of an old quilt. I've already cut it to size, and the way that I do that is just to really eyeball by placing in the signatures. These are totally completed. They have all their ephemera in them. They're ready to be sewn in. So all I do is leave about 1/4 of an inch around the journal when it's closed. So you can see that there, and there's enough there for the spine and a little bit on the sides there. So that's all I do. I did use a quilter's ruler to straighten up the edges. Now, because this is part of an old quilt, it already has a little bit of batting in it. If it didn't, I would add that. And I've already stitched around the edge here just to give it a little bit of rigidity while I'm doing things to it. So the next thing that I do is sew my doily on, just making sure that that's the right way. Yes. So I've got another one of those large oval doilies, and I like them because they hang over the edge a bit, but I have also just used lace fabric. You could use a rectangular doily. I've done that in the past, or several different doilies. It's really just up to you and what you have. So now that I've got that on there, I will pin it down and I will sew it. And I sew around here, and around this part here. Okay, so I'm going to go off and do that. Okay, here we go. This is the completed the doily after it's been sewn on, and I have also used the Tim Holtz walnut stain to go around the edges here, and also I have used a tea bag that I placed in hot water just in a few different spots over the doily to give it more of an aged appearance. So there we are. I've sewed around those parts and we're ready to decorate. So what I like to do is anything that's going to be sewn on, I do that before I attach the inside. So let's have a look at what we're going to sew on. And I like to use the creepy cloth. I've already cut a couple of pieces of that. I've folded it up so I know the part that I'm working on. So I just place that fairly pretty much in the center. And today I decided that I might actually use 2 lots. I normally only use 1, but I want it to be quite fluffy. Now this is the image that I've chosen to put on the front, and it's actually a photo of from about 1910. This is a reproduction of the Russian ballerina Anna Pavlova, and she's dancing a role called the Sylph, and you can see there are tiny little wings on the back of her costume, and the whole thing just really reminded me of the images that have been used in the Prima papers and the papers from Calico Collage, and I thought that would be perfect. So what I do now is I'm just going to stitch around here. I don't glue anything, I'm just stitching around there at the moment. Okay, so I'm back from the sewing machine, and you can see where I've stitched that. And while I was there, I also put on the sari silk and seam binding that I'm going to use for the ties. So I light on the back here and then just run a stitch up and down. Okay, so I needed to do that because when I put the lining on, I want it to be sandwiched between the two pieces. Okay, so let's have a look at the lining. This is the fabric that I've chosen because it had the music on it, and that went really well with the music paper that I've used in the signatures. So that's just been cut to exactly the same size as the cover, and the way that I attach it is I use a thing called heat and bond. It's used by quilters. I'll leave the details in the description box. It is used to attach one piece of fabric to another, and it works because it has glue on one side of the paper. So what we do is just place that very carefully onto the lining fabric. Ensuring that the smooth side of the paper is facing up and the rough side, which has the glue on it, is on the back of the fabric that we want to attach. All right, so I've got that and I need to go off to the iron and iron that. So I actually did one earlier, and you can see that it's quite firmly attached to the fabric. So what we do is just flick it up. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not, and you can peel that right off. Okay, and you can feel it's kind of tacky. So this now has no glue on it, and I do actually use that to make envelopes and little coin envelopes and things. Okay, so now that I've got my sticky piece of lining fabric, I need to iron it onto my cover. So I check to make sure that my graphic is the right way. I don't want to iron the lining paper on upside down and have the words upside down. So I take that off to the iron and iron it down. Right, back from the ironing board, this is now firmly attached to the front cover. I did, while I was in my sewing room, run a stitch about 1/4 of an inch in from the edges just to finish it off. In terms of the construction, it's not necessary. This is not going to come away from the cover, but I just like to finish it off with those stitches. The other thing that I would do is, the edge here is quite white. You can see the pellin, and I would go over that with the Tim Holtz walnut stain just to take away that whiteness. And depending on how grungy you were doing the journal, you might do the edges as well. So I'm just going to do that lightly, just so I don't have that really big contrast. Not going to do the whole thing, but you get the idea there. So you could also do the edges of the lining fabric. Okay, on to our next step, which is to mark where the signatures are going to go. And like most things, I eyeball this, and my first step is just to work out where the center of my cover is, and I'm just going to put a little pin in there. Then the top as well, I just press it, finger press it, and put a little pin in there, just so that I know where the center is. Once I've done that, I can take my template. You can see I use this a lot. It has the middle already marked on it, and again, I just eyeball an equal distance between the top and the bottom, because of course all my covers are slightly different, and if I use this, if I'm using a hardback cover as well. And I have this pen. This is a water erasable pen, and that's what I use to put the marks on my, where my stitching for the signatures is going to go. So because it's water erasable, I can just run a little cloth over that when it's done if I can see any of the holes. I'll just put them, do a little bit extra so that you can see them. So the signatures are 1/4 of an inch from the center. Where's my other little hole? Okay, there we are. There it is right there. Sometimes if there's a bit of writing, it can be quite hard to get to see it. There we are. Okay, so that marks where my signatures are going to go. So you could do it with a lead pencil, but I just happen to have this, so I use it. All right, so I've already put, and I can take my pins out, I've already put the holes in my signatures and decided which one is going to go first and which one is going to go second. And so my next step is just to sew those in, and I will do that and come back. I think there are lots of really great videos out there about how to actually sew your signatures in, and I'm going to sew directly into the cover, and you'll be able to see the stitching on the outside. So I'll come back once I've done that, and that will be our journal finished. Okay, so I'm back having sewn in my signatures. I'm quite happy with how they went in. I didn't sew one upside down or anything, which can happen to me anyway. So I'm quite happy with how it looks inside, nice and straight. That's the middle. I can see a little bit of the blue from the soluble pen, so I will go over that with a little bit of water to get rid of it. And there's the back. So we're up to the finishing touches, and that means that I'm going to finish decorating the front. Now, as I said, if I was going to sew on all of the embellishment, I would have done that at the same time as I sewed on the photo. But because I had a couple of chunky embellishments, I decided to do that last this time. So I'm going to put a little bit more creepy cloth around here just to disguise that so that sewing, okay, and just to soften the edge a little bit. So just had some random bits that I've cut off the bigger piece, and I just fiddle around until I get a look that I'm happy with. Okay, and that's actually going to be just glued in a couple of places to hold it in, but I'll just make sure that that's what I want. These are my other pieces. They're actually vintage, beautiful vintage leaf sprays that would have come off an old hat, I think. And then this was off a very large, ugly, chunky necklace, but I think it's going to look perfect there. And then I had these very fragile old little flowers, which I think would have been on a wedding veil or something like that, but they really reminded me of this little piece that that Anna's wearing, and I thought they might be just the thing. Now they are quite old and fragile, but I think they go with the vintage nature of this journal. Okay, so this one I am going to actually anchor it down. It's got some little holes there. I am going to stitch those, but I will, and so that's the last piece that I will put on. But that's essentially what it's going to look like. All right, so the next time you see me, I'll be doing a flip through of this journal.